Morgan Whiskers, a 6 feet 2 inches orange tabby cat with bright green eyes and darker orange stripes across his plump body, stood at the iron gates of Blackwood Manor. He wore a gray button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, khaki pants, and a messenger bag slung across his chest. As a social worker with 15 years of experience helping troubled children, Morgan had finally saved enough money to buy this old Victorian mansion on the edge of Millhaven. "It needs work," the real estate agent, a skinny rabbit named Ms. Hobson, said nervously. "But the price is unbeatable." Morgan nodded, taking in the overgrown garden, cracked windows, and peeling paint. The 3-story building stood against the cloudy sky like a sleeping giant. Something about it called to him, despite its sorry state. "Any idea why it's so cheap?" Morgan asked, pushing open the creaky gate. Ms. Hobson's nose twitched. "Well, it has been empty for nearly 50 years. And there were stories. Stories. Nothing important," she said quickly. "Just old tales. The building used to be Blackwood Children's Home until it closed in 1973. Morgan's ears perked up. "An orphanage? You didn't mention that before. Would that be a problem?" she asked, fumbling with her keys at the massive front door. "No," Morgan said. "Actually, I find it fitting. I've spent my career helping children find homes. Now I'll turn an old orphanage into my home." The door swung open with a long, painful creak. The smell of dust, mold, and something else, something older, drifted out. "I'll take it," Morgan said, not knowing these words would change his life forever. The strange discoveries. For the first week, Morgan focused on cleaning and repairs. He hired workers to fix the roof and electricity, but preferred doing much of the work himself. The house was enormous, with over 30 rooms across 3 floors, plus an attic and basement. Perfect for his dream of turning it into a small community center for foster children once he retired. On the 8th day, while tearing down old wallpaper in what had been a children's bedroom, Morgan found the first drawing. It had been hidden behind the faded pink paper, drawn directly onto the plaster wall. The simple crayon drawing showed stick figures of children sleeping in beds, while a tall, dark figure stood watching them from the doorway. "How creepy," Morgan muttered, taking a photo with his phone before continuing to scrape. Behind the next strip of wallpaper was another drawing, this one showing the same dark figure closer to the beds. In this picture, one child was awake, staring at the shadow visitor. By the time Morgan had stripped the whole wall, he'd found 7 drawings, telling a disturbing story. The shadow figure approaching sleeping children, touching their heads, and the children later appearing sick in bed. The final image showed children floating above their beds while the tall figure raised its arms. A cold feeling settled in Morgan's stomach. Children's drawings often reflected their fears and experiences. What had happened in this room? That night, Morgan heard the first noises, soft thuds from upstairs, like footsteps walking back and forth. He checked every room, but found nothing. As he returned to bed, he noticed the temperature had dropped. His breath fogged in front of his face, despite it being summer. "Old houses settle," he told himself, pulling the blankets tighter. Nothing to worry about. But deep down, Morgan knew something wasn't right. Tools that move. The next day, Morgan worked on fixing the wooden staircase. He arranged his tools carefully: hammer, nails, measuring tape, and sandpaper. He went to the kitchen to get water, and when he returned 2 minutes later, everything had been moved. The hammer now lay on the opposite end of the staircase. The nails were arranged in a perfect circle. What the? Morgan looked around, but he was alone in the house. This happened 3 more times that day. Each time he left his tools, they moved. By evening, Morgan was unnerved enough to call his friend, Officer Ben Growler, a large sheepdog who worked for the local police. "Maybe kids broke in and are playing tricks," Ben suggested over the phone. "Maybe," Morgan said, though he checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked from the inside. "I'll come by tomorrow to check," Ben promised. "In the meantime, maybe set up your phone to record while you're out of the room." Morgan liked this idea. He set his phone to record video, placed it on a shelf overlooking his workspace, then went to the bathroom. When he watched the footage later, his fur stood on end. The video showed his tools lifting into the air on their own, floating for several seconds, then dropping into new positions. Just before the movement started, a dark shadow passed across the wall, much taller than Morgan, with a strange, jerky walk. Morgan didn't sleep that night. Every time he started to drift off, he heard childish giggling from somewhere in the house, followed by the sound of running feet. The hidden room. The next morning, Ben arrived to find Morgan exhausted and jumpy. "You look terrible," Ben said, concerned. "I didn't sleep," Morgan admitted, showing Ben the video. "Tell me I'm not crazy." Ben watched it 3 times, his professional confidence visibly shaken. "I can't explain this, but I'm not leaving until we figure it out. Let's search the house properly." They started in the attic, finding only dust and old furniture. The first and second floors revealed nothing unusual. Then they reached the basement. The basement was unfinished, with concrete floors and stone walls. Old coal bins and rusted pipes lined one wall. Something felt wrong about the dimensions, though. The basement seemed smaller than it should be, given the size of the house above. "This wall," Ben said, tapping the north wall. "It sounds hollow." Morgan examined it more carefully and noticed faint lines in the concrete, the outline of a door, painted over many times. Using tools that thankfully stayed put, they broke through the false wall to reveal a hidden room about 20 feet square. Inside was a nightmare. Old medical equipment, hospital beds with restraints, and cabinets filled with bottles of medicine, most with labels too faded to read. "What is this place?" Ben whispered, his voice echoing strangely. Morgan's paws trembled as he opened a dusty leather journal lying on a metal desk. The handwriting was neat, but the contents horrifying. "Listen to this," Morgan said. "Patient 8 continues to display defiance. Increased treatment to level 3. Child claims to see visitors at night. Clearly delusional. Recommend isolation." The journal belonged to someone named Dr. Nathaniel Blackwood, who appeared to be both the orphanage director and a doctor conducting experiments on children he deemed troubled. "This isn't just an orphanage," Morgan said, feeling sick. "It was some kind of awful experimental facility. This doctor thought he was curing difficult children." Ben was examining the restraints on one of the small beds. "We need to report this to." A crash from upstairs interrupted him. Both men froze, then raced up the stairs. In the main hall, a large mirror had fallen and shattered. Written in the dust on the floor were 2 words: "Get out, the special friend." Despite Ben's insistence that Morgan stay at his house that night, the stubborn cat returned to Blackwood Manor. He needed to understand what had happened there. The children in those drawings, in that hidden room, they deserved justice, even decades later. In the hidden room, Morgan found more journals and began reading through Dr. Blackwood's notes. A disturbing pattern emerged. Children who misbehaved were brought to the basement for treatments. Many later reported seeing a special friend who visited at night. Blackwood dismissed these as hallucinations from the medicine, but multiple children described the same tall figure who would stand over their beds, touch their heads, and whisper to them. After these visits, the children often became sick with identical symptoms: fever, confusion, and what Blackwood called waking dreams. The doctor's notes grew increasingly erratic over time. In the final entry, dated June 17, 1973, he wrote, "The children are correct. There I saw someone in the halls at night. I saw it myself standing over Edward's bed. When it turned to look at me, I saw. No, I cannot write what I saw. We must leave this place immediately." The orphanage had closed the next day. All children were transferred to other facilities. No explanation was given in official records. Morgan sat back, rubbing his tired eyes. Outside, the sun had set, and the old house creaked and groaned around him. A child's voice drifted down the hallway. "He's coming to see you tonight." Morgan jumped up, knocking over his chair. "Hello? Who's there?" No answer came, but the temperature plummeted until Morgan could see his breath. The lights flickered, then went out completely. In the darkness, Morgan heard something moving, a slow, dragging step coming down the hall toward the study where he sat. Sickness falls. Morgan fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight just as the study door slowly swung open. The hallway beyond was empty, but as the beam of light swept across the floor, he saw wet footprints appearing one by one, small, like a child's, but leaving behind a strange black residue. Then the symptoms began. A pounding headache struck Morgan like a hammer blow. He stumbled, suddenly dizzy and feverish. The room spun around him as he collapsed into a chair. "What's happening to me?" he gasped, his fur suddenly damp with sweat. Through blurry vision, he saw a small figure standing in the doorway, a ghostly child, a young wolf pup wearing old-fashioned pajamas. "He touched you," the child said sadly. "Now you'll get sick like we did." "Who?" Morgan croaked, his throat burning. "Who touched me?" "The doctor," the child whispered. "He's still doing his work. He never stopped." The ghost child faded away, leaving Morgan alone with his rapidly worsening condition. He tried to call Ben, but his shaking paws dropped the phone. As he leaned down to retrieve it, he caught sight of his reflection in a decorative mirror on the wall. Behind him stood a tall figure in a doctor's coat, holding an antique syringe. The figure's face was hidden in shadow, except for glass-like eyes that reflected the light. Morgan whirled around, but the room was empty. When he turned back to the mirror, the figure was gone, but the sickness remained. Over the next 3 days, Morgan's condition deteriorated. Ben visited and wanted to take him to the hospital, but Morgan refused. "It won't help," he insisted, his voice weak. "This isn't a normal sickness." He had discovered more children's drawings hidden throughout the house, showing the progression of their experiences. The tall figure, Dr. Blackwood himself, had continued his treatments even after death, becoming something inhuman that fed on the suffering of children. "He punishes anyone who discovers what he did," Morgan explained to Ben. "And now he's doing the same to me that he did to them." The children speak. On the 4th night of his illness, with fever raging through his body, Morgan woke to find his bedroom filled with ghostly children. Cats, dogs, rabbits, all species, all wearing old-fashioned clothes. They stood silently around his bed, watching him with sad eyes. "We tried to warn you," said a small fox girl at the front of the group. "With our drawings, with moving your tools, with the message. Why didn't you just tell me?" Morgan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "He controls us," explained a badger boy. "We can only do small things when he's busy with others. Like now," added another child. "He's distracted by your friend, Ben." Morgan sat up in alarm. "What's happening to Ben?" The fox girl pointed toward the window. Outside, Morgan could see lights from a police car in the driveway. Ben had returned to check on him. With the children's help, Morgan staggered to the window. Below, he saw Ben approaching the front door, flashlight in hand. And behind him, a tall shadow detached itself from the darkness beneath the old oak tree. "No!" Morgan cried, pounding on the window, but no sound escaped. The ghostly children shook their heads sadly. "He can't hear you," the fox girl said. "No one can hear us when the doctor doesn't want them to." The journal's secret. Morgan refused to let Ben suffer his fate. With determination born of desperation, he dragged himself downstairs, the ghostly children following silently. He reached the front hall just as Ben was stepping inside. The tall shadow had disappeared, but Morgan knew it was somewhere in the house waiting. "Morgan," Ben exclaimed, shocked at his friend's appearance. "You need a hospital right now." "No time," Morgan gasped, pulling Ben toward the study. "Need to show you something." In the study, Morgan pulled out the final journal he discovered, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Unlike the clinical notes of the earlier journals, this one contained Dr. Blackwood's personal thoughts, revealing his descent into madness and cruelty. "Listen," Morgan said, opening to a page he'd marked. He writes, "The children's suffering strengthens it. Every tear, every cry of pain feeds the entity I've invited into Blackwood Manor. In return, it grants me power over them. They all obey now. They all submit to my treatments." Ben's professional skepticism was crumbling as the room grew colder around them. What entity? What was he doing? "He made a deal with something," Morgan explained, turning pages rapidly. "Something that promised to help him control the children. But it was using him too. By the end, he realized he'd become its puppet." The lights flickered as Morgan found the passage he sought. "The binding is in my blood, in the walls, in the foundation. As long as Blackwood Manor stands, our contract stands. I cannot leave. I cannot die. I can only continue my work." A deep, inhuman voice spoke from the doorway. "And I have never stopped." Both men turned to see a tall figure in a stained doctor's coat. Where his face should have been was only shadow, except for two gleaming points of light like eyes. In one hand, he held an antique syringe filled with black liquid. "Run!" Morgan shouted, pushing Ben toward the window. Confronting the doctor, the thing that had been Dr. Blackwood moved with unnatural speed, blocking their escape. Ben drew his service weapon, but the bullets passed through the figure as if through smoke. "Your friend is already mine," the doctor said, his voice like gravel. "See how the sickness progresses." Morgan felt another wave of dizziness overtake him. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the floor. The ghostly children appeared again, surrounding him protectively. "You've taken enough," the fox girl said to the doctor. "We won't let you take him too." The doctor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You have no power here. This is my domain." But something had changed. Morgan noticed the children seemed more solid now, less transparent. They joined hands, forming a circle around him. "What's happening?" Ben asked, kneeling beside Morgan while keeping his eyes on the doctor. "They're protecting me," Morgan whispered. Then, understanding dawned. The journal said the binding is in the blood in the walls. With sudden clarity, Morgan knew what needed to be done. "Ben, the basement. The hidden room. We need to destroy it." Ben nodded, helping Morgan to his feet. The circle of ghostly children moved with them, keeping the doctor at bay. Whenever he tried to approach, the children's forms brightened, pushing him back. "Hurry," the fox girl urged. "We can't hold him for long." They made their way to the basement, the doctor's rage manifesting as winds that howled through the house. Pictures flew off walls, furniture overturned, and the temperature dropped until ice crystals formed on the windows. In the hidden room, Morgan pointed shakily to the metal desk. There, his blood. He cut himself in a ritual. The floorboards underneath. Ben moved the desk, revealing dark stains on the wooden floor beneath. Using tools from Morgan's workbench, they pried up the boards, finding a small metal box buried in the dirt foundation. Inside was a contract written in both ink and blood, binding Nathaniel Blackwood's soul to the house and granting him power over its occupants, in exchange for providing the suffering of children to whatever dark entity he had summoned. Breaking the curse. The doctor appeared in the doorway, his form larger and more solid than before. The ghostly children scattered like mist before a gale. "Stop," he commanded, his voice shaking the foundation. "You do not understand what you're doing." "We understand perfectly," Morgan said, his voice weak but determined. "You tortured children. You made them suffer. And you're still doing it." Ben pulled out his cigarette lighter. "This ends now." As he flicked the lighter, the doctor lunged forward with impossible speed. His shadowy hand closed around Ben's throat, lifting the dog off the ground. Morgan, summoning his last strength, grabbed the contract and held it to the lighter's flame. The paper resisted at first, then caught fire with a strange blue flame. The doctor screamed, a sound no living thing could make, and released Ben. His form began to dissolve, particles of shadow peeling away like ash. "What have you done?" he shrieked as more of his body disintegrated. "Set them free," Morgan answered, watching as the contract burned. "Set everyone free." Around them, the ghostly children reappeared, their forms growing brighter as the doctors faded. Their faces showed first surprise, then joy as they realized what was happening. The doctor made one last desperate lunge toward Morgan, but his hands passed through the cat's body. With a final howl of rage, Dr. Blackwood's spirit dissolved completely. The hidden room began to shake. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the foundation shifted. "We need to get out," Ben urged, supporting Morgan. "The whole place might collapse." As they climbed the stairs, the ghostly children followed, no longer sad but radiant with newfound freedom. At the front door, the fox girl stopped. "Thank you," she said, her voice clearer than before. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." One by one, the children faded away, not in fear, but in a gentle glow of light, finally at peace. Morgan and Ben made it to the safety of the front yard, just as the hidden room collapsed, taking with it a portion of the basement. The rest of Blackwood Manor remained standing, but somehow it looked different, lighter, as if a shadow had been lifted from it. The new beginnings. Morgan's mysterious illness vanished with the doctor's destruction. Within days, he was fully recovered, though forever changed by what he had experienced. Rather than selling Blackwood Manor, Morgan decided to complete his original plan, renovating it into a community center for foster children. The basement was sealed permanently, but the rest of the house was transformed with bright colors, comfortable furniture, and lots of natural light. On opening day, visitors commented on the wonderful atmosphere. "It feels so welcoming," one social worker said. "Hard to believe this was once an orphanage with such a sad history." Morgan just smiled, not mentioning the complete history. Some things were better left unsaid. Late that night, after everyone had gone, Morgan sat alone in what had once been the main dormitory, now converted into a library filled with children's books. As he turned off the last light, he caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of his eye. The fox girl stood by the bookshelves, more transparent than before but still visible. She wasn't alone. A few of the other children stood with her. Morgan's heart raced. "I thought you were free." "We are," she explained with a smile. "We can go whenever we want now. But some of us decided to stay a little longer." "Why?" Morgan asked. "To protect the new children," she said simply. "To make sure nothing bad ever happens in this house again." The ghostly children waved goodbye and faded away, not in fear or sadness, but with the promise to watch over the house that had once been their prison and was now a sanctuary. Morgan left the night light on for them, just in case they preferred it that way. As he walked to his own room in the East Wing, he heard the faint sound of children's laughter. Not the terrified kind he'd heard when he first arrived, but the joyful sounds of children at play. Blackwood Manor had a new purpose and new guardians. The nightmare was truly over.